Hi, everyone. Kyle and Keela here from Decise. And today we're going to pick up our conversation that we started last week on mergers and acquisitions. Now, Keela, last time we talked, we kind of focused the conversation on the more frustrating aspects of an M&A program. But for today, let's
Mhm.
really focus on being successful, pulling these transactions off. Now, in
Okay.
executing an M&A transaction, you don't recommend just a traditional program structure, do you?
No, I don't. Usually that's not sufficient. In M&As, they're usually more complex, usually bigger, and usually many more unknowns. And so a standard program management structure is not usually sufficient. Um, and I also think a lot of times probably unreasonable expectations are being put on the program management function. The program management function isn't there to make all the decisions for the organization, right? They're there to tee up the right decisions, to determine the right cadence to be able to get everything done on time. But they
Sure.
can't also do it all. And I think that is something that is commonly placed on the program management team. But what you really need in mergers and acquisitions, as well as other complex, tech related transformational programs, is I think a triad. And you need the
Okay.
program management function. You need a strong program management function, but you also need technical architects. You've got to have the technical leadership right there with your program management. And you also need problem solvers. A lot of time, the skill set is going to be in the consulting space. So you need people who can look at challenges and figure out how to assemble puzzle pieces to make it work. You also need people in that kind of skill set area to be able to communicate in with the teams. What is the vision and direction, as well as be able to communicate, influence, persuade leadership and other teams that are directly related to the program.
So big M&A programs have a lot of constituents, a lot of stakeholders. You just said you've got to be really good at communicating. What are some
Mm-hmm.
techniques or tips that you'd have on how you can do this effectively?
Okay, yeah. So communicating, there's a lot of different audiences, and I think a lot of times uh, IT teams, they prepare one message, right? They're like, here, it's all right here. You'll see it. Here's my 40-page status report. Okay, great. Who is it targeted to? No one in particular. It just had a crap ton of information in it that most of the people reading it have no idea what to do with. And so, really, you do have to aggregate that information. You got to know the details of what's going
Sure.
on, but then you have to distill that information on what each audience or each reader needs to know. So, take that and then tell it to them based on what they're interested in, what's next for them, why it impacts them, and then go to your next audience. And you got to do the same thing. And so, a tool that we have used before is creating what we call dashboards or executive program status dashboards. And these are really useful in that it can help simplify this process to some degree. You still have to spend the time to understand your audiences and what they're interested in, but then you can create dashboards that are playing to what they're interested in, what they need to know, and have it based on the same foundational information that you're getting from all of your delivery teams. There's a few products and tools that are out there that can help you do this, but essentially it aggregates all of your program information, and then you choose what you want to show and how you want to show it to each one of your targeted audiences. We find this really helpful because one, it's always on. And in mergers and acquisitions, it's not a 9 to 5 gig. People are up at 2 a.m., needing an answer, texting one another. And you just don't want to be answering those texts at 2 a.m., So having these always on dashboards
Sleep is good.
allow people to access the information that they need, those critical pieces of information. And we see that it cuts down on overall program status meetings as well.
I mean, that sounds like a much more modern way of approaching it. When I think about a dashboard for different audiences, I go, oh man, I'm going to have to copy and paste. I'm going to have to try to recreate all of this information, for every single audience member. That's not exactly what you're talking about, though, is it?
No, it's not. I'm talking about live dashboards that you essentially create a series of widgets that are targeted to each audience, and that widget is going to pull the most recent information for you. So you just have to decide who is your audience, what do they need to know, how can I show that to them, and create that widget that matches that. And then from there, it will just continually go and pull from your base of data, your kind of constantly updated program information that all your program managers and all your delivery teams are already using to be able to refresh that information.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I think there's nothing more frustrating than wondering like what is the status of this critical work, and you pull the latest dashboard and oh, it's 3 weeks old or it's 4 weeks old.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you think about the broader community? Like this is, I mean, you just described essentially creating customized dashboards and analytics for different stakeholders, but how do you engage the broader community of IT users to make sure that there's frequent and healthy engagement throughout the duration of the program?
Yeah, so this is a really critical aspect. And a lot of companies during mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures overlook the users. In their minds, they're
Mm,
going, well,
okay.
they know this is happening, right? They're just going to have to deal with it. How many times have you been told you're just going to have to deal with it and you dealt with it well? Not many times. And so, what you need to, constantly remember is that your users, the IT users in an organization, are the productive engines of the company. They're using IT tools to get their job done faster and better. And so if you mess with that, you're messing with their productivity. You're also messing with their overall job satisfaction. And that doesn't go over well. And so you end up, with a lot of support calls that you don't want to deal with, a lot of angry emails and calls that you don't want to deal with. So you got to keep the user front and center and how to minimize the impact on their productivity and their satisfaction. I also, funny story as an example, like the worst of the worst happened in one M&A that I was aware of, and the impact happened to the CEO.
Mm,
Uh, they were doing a
not
laptop
good.
switch out, right? Like new laptop, converting everything over. It bricks. It bricks at like 9 a.m. And so, they didn't recover it. They came in, they had thought, they prepared, they had a backup laptop in case, something was to happen. They got them online. Ooh, and then email didn't work.
Oh no.
The CEO not having email or calendar to be able to attend their meetings in that day the right way, the easy way, was not a good scenario. And of course, the leaders of the IT, area receive phone calls from the CEO's department, and I would say that was probably not a highlight of their career.
Yeah, well, they definitely didn't get emails from the CEO. I think, man, what a disappointment. That's sort of a symbolic moment in the program, right? Like, okay, I'm going to retire this one. I'm picking up my new one. Like, what a big moment.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that's a disappointment. I like the way you talked about IT users as the horsepower that kind of pushes the engine and the motor, and that changes the dynamic. So it's maybe a little bit more like thinking of the users as enablers, of course, which is the right way to think of it, and a little bit less like hostages to the change. Like, okay, you got
Yeah.
this, or you're gonna get it. I like
Yep.
that a lot. But no IT shops run themselves. IT almost always
Mm-mm.
is powered by a network of vendors, suppliers, and partners.
Yep.
That's a good kind of portion of the conversation focused internally. But how do you recommend bringing partners along on the journey for a big transaction
Yeah.
like an M&A?
Yes. Okay. You have to bring partners along on the journey. Like commonly you'll see companies, going through this and they're like, we've got so much to manage. I can't deal with my vendors and my partners right now, or they support other companies. They've seen M&A, they should know what's going to be needed from them. They don't have a crystal ball. They don't know exactly what you need and when you need it and what you're going after. And it also is a kind of a risky time for them. They want to make sure that they're going to keep your business. They want to make sure that they're serving you well, and they need to know what you need in order to serve you well. And so I recommend having a partner forum, a regular engagement of your partners. You can group partners, you can do partners all at once, anything along those lines. You have to, kind of go through the information in advance to make sure you're not disclosing something to a third party that is not ready to be disclosed to a third party. But that's a quick skim. And a lot of times, the leaders in those areas, they've got a good feel for what can be shared and what cannot be shared. But you get the partners in the loop so they understand the timing, what type of activities, expectations on them, that they need to be ready for. And so that can one just help them be ready to catch probably the increased workloads or the changing workloads that are going to come their way as a result of the transaction. But even more than that, they're in the know. And in transition, IT integrations and mergers, acquisitions, things happen. Bad things happen sometimes, that you weren't anticipating for a whole variety of reasons. And when you have your network of partners and vendors and suppliers in the know, they are much more able to jump in quickly and be able to assist you to overcome whatever that challenge may be. So they're also kind of like a safety blanket.
Yeah, and it's awesome. I mean, especially once the deal's been announced publicly, you get this chance to bring everybody together, create a one team mentality, and then it's less about, okay, we got to tick every single vendor, and it's more like, okay, guys, we're in this together. Let's really do this.
Absolutely. And it's not a one-time thing either. That's sometimes you'll see, companies, okay, let me tell you what's going on. And I don't want to tell you until I have it all figured out. And that's
Yeah.
months down the road, and then finally you tell them once and then the communication goes off. But the thing is, we know those plans adapt, they change over time. And your vendors need to have more of a regular touch point. So making sure that it's something that's probably monthly is something that's worked previously before.
That's a good suggestion. I like your example of the CEO office. That's kind of funny. I think most people would think about being in the CEO's office as like a career highlight. Obviously, that's not the case here. You know, it's more like a low light, I suppose.
Yeah, it can be a low light. That is not how you want your name to be remembered by the CEO. Is the person who shut off their email and calendar access or bricked their device for a while. So yeah, avoiding that. But really, you don't want to be known by that by anyone in your organization, CEO or anyone. So really making sure to keep that user focus is important. All users.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I mean, what you're talking about is essentially the IT aspects of an M&A transaction should be really quiet, ideally, right? This is an enabler for the business to achieve their outcomes. Do you have any other tips or suggestions that you give on how to run these major transformational programs successfully?
Um, I think just making sure that one from the start, that you are laying out a strategy and a plan for how you're going to achieve. A lot of times teams like to jump right in and just let's start doing stuff. But what you end up with is with a bunch of disconnected decisions and people running in different paths, and it doesn't come back and connect. And you don't know if I'm just transitioning this or if I'm actually going to improve it or transform it in the journey. You end up with um, overrunning your budget, missing your timelines, and a bunch of dissatisfied people, whether it's your IT team who's trying to juggle all of this, without a clear plan forward, or your users who are really confused and you've left them in the dark. So really start with a strategy, get a plan in place, make those core fundamental decisions, get a leadership team in place that's going to be able to help you to deliver the program and make sure that it's program management skills, it's technical architecture skills, as well as consulting and communication skills. Get that team assembled for larger programs, which most M&As are larger programs. I actually like to see that triad of leadership replicated. So you have that type of group at the top running the whole IT program, but then you have them over each work stream as well, because that triad of skill sets is necessary for each of those work streams to be able to make the right decisions, stay to their plan, get things done and communicated well. So I recommend that. And then also the dashboards that we talked about, create those dashboards, target them to all of the key groups that need information from the IT integration team. And then you still have to communicate, so you're going to have to, IT leaders across the program, you have to put yourself on repeat. It will sound funny, that you're going to say the same message. Here's our strategy. Here's our direction. Here are the expectations. You say it over and over and over, because the first time you said it, they didn't hear it. The second time, they didn't believe you meant it. The third time, it might start to stick, but it's really like the seventh or eighth time where they're like, oh, they're freaking serious about this. We're hitting these timelines. We're doing it like this. So you've got to put yourself on repeat and make sure that you're tailoring your communications, to all the different impacted parties.
That's a really awesome perspective. Thanks for sharing it. And I think at
Mhm.
the end of the day, your advice is just, so helpful. And when teams finish this transaction and they actually pull it off, I think most people look back at it as like one of the, highlights of their career, a real achievement. And that sort of enthusiasm and pride, I think, lasts a long time.
It
Well,
absolutely
thank
does.
you.
I mean, they take
Yeah.
a couple minutes, right? They take a few minutes or maybe a month or so to like deep breaths, go on vacation because it was probably an intense last year to 3 years or maybe even more to try and pull
Mhm.
it off. But yes, these types of programs can be, seminal for a lot of people in their IT careers. It's rarely matched in the IT space to have something so big and so complex and so intense. You don't see it in a lot of other scenarios. And so it's a great learning experience. It takes a lot of resiliency and just the ability to keep going back and keep trying. But yeah, in the end, it's a monumental achievement, and it's worth being proud about.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Keela. And we enjoyed this second part of the conversation. If you'd like to learn more, please reach out to us at deciseglobal.com. Thanks, everybody.
All right,
Bye.
thanks.